He saw his childhood nanny on the street, soaking wet. What he did next stunned all. The city continued its steady drizzle, turning ordinary streets into shimmering rivers of reflected neon and gray sky. Daniel Walker's gaze wandered past the glass of his car window, and for a moment he was lost in the blurred dance of lights on wet pavement. Then something caught his attention, a small figure huddled under a thin, dripping umbrella at the corner of an intersection. The woman's frame was slight, her shoulders curved inward as if the weight of the world rested upon them. She held a small, weathered piece of cardboard, scrawled with words pleading for help, and Daniel felt an unexpected jolt run through him. There was nothing remarkable about her at first glance. She was just one more person navigating the rain-soaked streets, vulnerable and invisible to the rushing city around her. Yet, something about her posture struck him, a strange pull that stirred a memory buried deep within him. The subtle tremble of her hands, the way her head tilted slightly as she looked up at passers-by, her quiet, patient persistence, it all seemed hauntingly familiar. Daniel's brow furrowed, and for a moment, he forgot the comfort of his car's interior, the leather seat beneath him, the soft hum of the engine. He was no longer a distant observer. He was a witness to something that tugged insistently at the edges of his consciousness. He studied her carefully, letting the rain blur and sharpen the details in equal measure. Her eyes deep, kind, with a flicker of something unyielding despite. Hardship seemed to call to him across the street. A faint scar on her wrist, partially concealed by the worn sleeve of her coat, drew his gaze, stirring a recollection he could not immediately place. There was a rhythm to her movements, a subtle grace in the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, and Daniel's chest tightened with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, something almost aching. The city passed around him in a blur of umbrellas, headlights, and hurried footsteps, but Daniel's attention was fixed entirely on her. Every detail seemed to matter, the fraying edges of her coat, the way the rain clung to her hair, the faint arch of her eyebrows when she glanced down at the cardboard sign. Even the way she held the umbrella, slightly tilted, as if it were both protection and barrier from the world, resonated with an unspoken story. There was a dignity in her vulnerability, a quiet endurance that made him catch his breath. Daniel's mind raced, dredging up fragments of a past he had thought long buried. Faces, voices, scents, and soft laughter flitted through his memory, like fragments of an old photograph. There had been someone patient, gentle, who had always been there in the background of his childhood, tending to small crises, soothing nightmares, offering warmth when the world outside felt cold. He blinked, trying to reconcile the image in front of him with the figure of memory, yet his heart recognized the truth before his mind could fully grasp it. He leaned forward slightly, his forehead resting against the glass, as if that simple act could bridge the distance of years and rain. His fingers tapped lightly against the window, almost unconsciously, echoing the rhythm of the rain. He watched as the woman lifted her eyes momentarily to survey the passing pedestrians, her gaze filled with quiet resilience, and the sense of familiarity tightened in his chest. There was something unmistakable in the tilt of her head, the subtle gestures of her hands, the very way she existed in the world, as if she had always belonged to a chapter of his life that had been left unfinished. Daniel's breath caught as recognition slowly crystallized. He knew that posture, that careful, unwavering patience. He knew the kindness in her eyes, the warmth beneath the lines of hardship etched into her face. His pulse quickened, and a strange mix of disbelief and longing swept through him. The city continued its relentless rhythm around them, but in that moment, it was as if the world had narrowed to the rain, the puddles, and the frail figure beneath the umbrella who, without realizing it, had suddenly become the center of everything he could remember and everything he had missed. As the car idled silently, Daniel's mind held onto every detail, the trembling hands, the scarred wrist, the subtle nods and gestures that seemed impossibly familiar. He realized that this encounter was no ordinary coincidence. Something in the way she carried herself, in the quiet dignity of her misery, was calling him back to a past he had not visited in decades, demanding attention, stirring emotions he had long left behind. And in that moment, as the rain continued to blur the edges of the world, Daniel Walker knew that he could not simply drive away. Something deeper, something urgent, was awakening an instinct to reconnect, to see, to remember, and perhaps to act. The rain fell steadily over the city, turning the streets into rivers of reflected gray and amber light. Through the windshield of a sleek black luxury car, droplets streaked and danced across the glass, distorting the world outside into a watercolor blur. Inside the vehicle, Daniel Walker sat quietly, his hands resting lightly on his lap, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed a mind far from idle. He was impeccably dressed, a tailored navy suit that spoke of wealth, influence, and control. But even the sharp lines of his clothing couldn't hide the subtle slump of his posture. The quiet heaviness that had taken residence in his chest. At 45, Daniel had everything that society equated with success. Towering skyscrapers bore his name. Investments multiplied effortlessly, and luxury seemed to follow him like a shadow. Yet, in that moment, staring at the rain-slicked streets, none of it mattered. His eyes, dark and intense, seemed to look past the city itself, focusing on something distant, something unreachable. Memories stirred like fragile ghosts, flickering in the corners of his mind. He remembered the soft hum of a lullaby long ago, the scent of soap and warmth that had filled a small kitchen, the gentle hands of someone who had always been there when his own parents were not. The rhythmic patter of rain against the windshield became a kind of metronome, pacing his thoughts, marking the distance between now and then. Puddles on the asphalt reflected the muted glow of streetlights, each ripple and shimmer a reminder that the world outside was always moving, always changing, yet some parts of the past remained stubbornly vivid, refusing to be washed away. Daniel's gaze lingered on a corner cafe, its warm interior a stark contrast to the cold, wet exterior. He saw children laughing, mothers huddled over coffee cups, couples sharing umbrellas. The scenes tugged at something deep within him, a bittersweet ache of nostalgia mixed with regret. Despite the quiet elegance of the car's interior, the soft leather seats, the faint scent of polished wood, the subdued hum of the engine, Daniel felt a profound solitude. He thought about the choices he had made, the ambitions that had driven him, and the cost of every achievement. There were no parents waiting to share in his victories, no familiar hands to celebrate quietly beside him. The loneliness, once a distant whisper during childhood, had become a companion that no wealth could silence. As the car moved slowly through the puddled streets, the blurred reflections of neon signs and traffic lights seemed almost alive, dancing across his features, highlighting the tension etched into his face. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of the rain and the muted engine lull him into a rare stillness. He could almost feel the presence of someone from his past, a comforting shadow from the days when life was simpler, and love had been given freely without expectation or pretense. Opening his eyes again, Daniel's attention was drawn to the cityscape stretching before him, tall buildings shrouded in mist, streets glistening with rain, the occasional passerby hurrying beneath umbrellas. Everything looked the same, yet he knew that his perspective had shifted. The emptiness in his eyes was not just longing. It was recognition that life's true richness was not measured by power or material possessions, but by the fleeting, irreplaceable moments of human connection that shaped who he had become. And in that quiet, reflective drive through the rainy city, Daniel Walker felt the first stirrings of a memory that would soon take him by surprise, an echo from the past, gentle yet insistent, beckoning him toward a revelation he could not yet see, but that would change everything. Daniel Walker's heart thumped in a rhythm that seemed almost louder than the pounding rain around him. Without a word to his driver, He pressed the brake, the car sliding slightly on the slick asphalt. He swung open the door and stepped into the storm, feeling the immediate chill of rain soak through his tailored navy suit. Each droplet clung to the fabric, weighing it down, but Daniel barely noticed. His attention was entirely on the small, frail figure beneath the thin umbrella. Something inside him had shifted, a tug stronger than curiosity, more insistent than coincidence. With each step toward her, the sounds of the city, the splashing tires, the distant honking, the muffled chatter of pedestrians faded into a background hum. His eyes, sharp yet wide with disbelief, traced the delicate curve of her shoulders, the slight slump that hinted at years of endurance. And then he saw her face. The world seemed to pause. Time slowed as recognition unfurled like a fragile blossom. Mrs. Eleanor, his childhood nanny. The woman who had been his constant in the whirlwind of parental ambition and social expectation. The woman whose gentle voice had sung lullabies when his parents were too busy to notice him, whose hands had wiped away tears that no one else had cared to see. Daniel felt a sudden, almost painful rush of memory, each fragment sharper, more vivid than the last. He could see her kneeling beside his small bed when nightmares had left him trembling, her warm hands smoothing the tangled hair from his forehead, whispering words that made the darkness retreat. He could hear her soft hum as she guided him through endless lessons, patiently explaining sums and spelling until his little face lit up with understanding. He remembered the lunches she packed, the careful way she had packed his coat, making sure the buttons were aligned, the seams neat, every small act a testament to care, devotion, and love she had never demanded recognition for. And now, decades later, she stood before him, her gentle eyes slightly widened in surprise, her hands trembling as they gripped the cardboard sign. Rain streamed down her face, but it was not tears of joy, yet it was disbelief, uncertainty, and perhaps a touch of shame. How could she have imagined that the boy she had once nurtured, now a man cloaked in fortune, would recognize her here, in this vulnerable moment? Daniel slowed his pace as he closed the distance. Every step was measured, almost reverent. He wanted to give her time to process, time to notice that the familiar presence from her past had finally found her. Yet the closer he got, the more concrete the memory became. Every feature on her face, every faint line etched by years of hard living, every gentle curve of her mouth. He could see the faint scar on her wrist, the one he remembered from when she had accidentally brushed against the stove in his tiny kitchen all those years ago, muttering apologies as he had hugged her and told her it was nothing. When he finally stopped a few feet away, rain soaking them both into muted silhouettes, Daniel spoke her name softly, almost a whisper carried on the wind and rain. Mrs. Eleanor. Her gaze lifted, startled, and recognition sparked across her features, slow and trembling. She blinked, as if trying to clear the mist from her memory and the rain alike. And then, just as a flower opens to sunlight, understanding bloomed. She gasped softly, and her eyes, wide and glistening, locked onto his dot. In that instant, the years collapsed. The bustling city, the rain, the soaked asphalt, all of it faded into insignificance. All that remained was the bond that had been forged long ago, the countless sacrifices she had made, the small, uncelebrated acts of love that had shaped a boy into the man standing before her now. Daniel felt a rush of gratitude, regret, and awe. He wanted to reach out, to erase the years of suffering she had endured alone, to restore the dignity that life had stripped from her in these harsh streets. And in her eyes, he saw it too, a flicker of recognition, a spark of relief, and the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, the boy she had cared for had not forgotten her. The storm raged on around them, yet in the midst of the rain, a quiet, profound reunion was taking place, one that transcended time, hardship, and silence. Daniel raised his hand slowly, unsure whether words could capture the weight of what he felt. Mrs. Eleanor mirrored his motion, and as their eyes met, a shared understanding passed between them. The past, with all its tenderness and sacrifice, was suddenly alive again. And in that soaked gray afternoon, the first fragile threads of reconnection began to weave themselves into the fabric of their lives once more. The rain fell relentlessly, drumming a steady rhythm on the thin umbrella Mrs. Eleanor clutched, its worn edges struggling to shield her from the downpour. Her small figure trembled, not only from the chill but from the weight of years spent navigating a world that had often overlooked her. When she sensed movement beside her, she instinctively bowed her head, clutching the cardboard sign tighter. Her voice, barely above a whisper, broke the monotony of the rain as she muttered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone." Daniel Walker's heart tightened at the sound. He could see the shame etched into her posture. The careful attempt to shrink herself, to become invisible, as if acknowledging her presence would make her guilty. The woman before him was the same one who had once nurtured him, guided him, and protected him from the small tragedies of childhood. Yet she did not recognize him, or perhaps she refused to, out of fear that he would not remember. Softly Daniel spoke, his voice cutting through the rhythm of the rain like a gentle melody. "It's me, Daniel," he said, his tone filled with warmth and familiarity. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The rain continued to pour, washing streaks down their faces, and for a moment, Mrs. Eleanor's wide eyes seemed only to reflect the gray of the city around them. Then recognition struck like a lightning bolt, sudden and sharp. Her eyes widened further, and tears, mingled with the raindrops that ran down her face, spilled freely. Her trembling hands let go of the cardboard sign, and she pressed them to her mouth, as though trying to contain a surge of emotions that had no outlet for decades. Daniel stepped closer, his soaked suit clinging to him, the rain dripping from his hair, yet he scarcely noticed. Every detail of her expression, the quiver of her lips, the way her eyes shimmered with disbelief, the faint scar along her wrist was burned into his memory. The years of distance, the decades of silent separation, all seemed to collapse into this single, raw moment of reunion. At first, words were fragile, hesitant, faltering. Mrs. Eleanor's voice cracked as she began to speak, a brittle melody woven from sorrow and survival. She recounted the story of the years he had missed, the death of her husband, sudden and cruel, leaving her alone in a world that demanded more than she could provide. The savings she had painstakingly accumulated vanished in a haze of medical bills, debts, and rising rents. Even her own children, once expected to be her support, had abandoned her, chasing lives that left no room for a struggling mother. She had lived hand to mouth, day after day, relying on pride and perseverance to shield her from humiliation, never daring to reach out for help she felt she no longer deserved. Her voice trembled as she spoke, cracking under the weight of honesty and vulnerability. I didn't want to bother anyone. I thought I'd be forgotten," she admitted, the rain dripping down her hair and mingling with the tears that traced lines along her weathered face. Each syllable carried the fragility of years of quiet suffering, years of survival without acknowledgement or comfort. Daniel reached out, his hand hovering just above hers, hesitant to break the fragile bubble of emotion surrounding them. The wind tugged at her umbrella, the rain soaked through the thin material, and yet there was a moment of profound intimacy between them, as though the storm itself had paused to witness this reunion. He listened, truly listened, absorbing every word, every pause, every shiver of her voice. A surge of empathy and sorrow rushed through him. He had imagined this encounter countless times in his mind, but never anticipated the raw, unguarded truth laid bare before him. The woman who had once sacrificed so much for his childhood comfort was now standing in the rain, trembling, almost invisible to the world, and yet she had survived. She had endured silently, without complaint, and without ever asking for what she rightfully deserved: care, recognition, And dignity. As her final words faltered into the drizzle, Daniel's gaze softened. He understood not only her suffering, but the immense resilience that had carried her through years of hardship. The rain no longer felt cold or cruel. It seemed almost cleansing, washing away decades of separation, shame, and loneliness. In that gray, rain-soaked street, the air between them vibrated with unspoken understanding. Words failed to capture the magnitude of the moment, but their eyes conveyed everything: recognition, relief, sorrow, and the tentative promise of restored hope. The world might have forgotten her, Daniel realized, but he never had, and now he would make sure the world would see her again. Daniel Walker stood in the rain, watching Mrs. Eleanor's frail form tremble beneath the thin umbrella. For a fleeting moment, he imagined simply giving her cash, a token to ease her hardship, or perhaps inviting her to his mansion where she could live in comfort, far from the harshness of the streets. But as he looked at her, he realized that such gestures, though helpful, would not address the deeper wound, the quiet erosion of dignity, the invisible scars left by years of abandonment and hardship. Money alone could never restore what life had stripped away. He needed to do something far greater, something that would honor her entirely. By dawn the next day, the city was abuzz. News outlets whispered of a mysterious announcement from Daniel Walker, the billionaire known for his shrewd investments and towering success. Inside his sleek office, overlooking the rain-washed streets now glinting under a clear morning sun, Daniel had already put plans into motion. He had launched a charity foundation, the Eleanor Foundation, dedicated to supporting elders, caregivers, and the unsung heroes of countless households who had sacrificed for others without recognition. Its mission was clear: to restore dignity, honor, and opportunity to those who had given selflessly and been forgotten. The decision was not made lightly. Daniel spent the night drafting the mission, contacting supporters, and arranging for a grand inaugural event. He envisioned a celebration where Mrs. Eleanor would not simply be a beneficiary, but the very symbol of what the foundation stood for. She would not be seen as a helpless figure in the rain, but as a leader, a woman whose lifetime of care and sacrifice deserved acknowledgement and respect. By afternoon, the venue was alive with anticipation. Journalists lined the hall, cameras poised to capture every moment. The crowd murmured in curiosity. The idea of a billionaire turning his attention to those who had once nurtured others sparked intrigue. Some wondered what prompted this sudden display of philanthropy, while others whispered speculations about secret personal connections. And then, the moment arrived. The doors opened, and Mrs. Eleanor stepped inside, still hesitant, still carrying traces of the humility that had defined her existence for so long. Her frail frame, once overlooked and dismissed, was now adorned in an elegant dress, her hair carefully styled, her posture tentatively confident. Daniel stood beside her, his hand gently resting near hers, a silent anchor of support. A hush fell over the room as Daniel approached the podium. He spoke with calm authority, his voice carrying both power and profound sincerity. "Today," he said, "we honor those who have given so much, often without recognition, often without reward. And we begin with someone who shaped my life in ways I could never repay: Mrs. Eleanor, my childhood nanny, a woman whose love and sacrifice helped make me who I am today." At that moment, Mrs. Eleanor was revealed to the audience not as a beggar, not as a figure of pity, but as the honored chairwoman of the Eleanor Foundation. Applause erupted, echoing through the hall like a wave of acknowledgement long overdue. Faces in the crowd shone with admiration, some wiping away tears, others nodding in stunned recognition of the transformative gesture unfolding before them. Journalists hurried to capture her radiant smile, the dignity that had once been hidden beneath years of struggle, now glowing brightly in every frame. Mrs. Eleanor, initially overwhelmed, allowed herself to absorb the magnitude of the moment. The soft tremor in her hand steadied as she grasped the podium, her voice quivering with a mix of disbelief, pride, and gratitude. She spoke of her years of quiet service, of nights spent comforting children who were not her own, of sacrifices made with no expectation of return. Her words, once fragile and tentative, carried power, now power born not from wealth, but from recognition, respect, and restored dignity. Daniel watched her, his own chest tight with emotion. He felt the weight of years collapse into this single moment, the past's pain, the present's joy, and the future's promise converging in a shared acknowledgement of her worth. What began as a rainy street encounter had transformed into a public restoration of honor, one that would ripple outward to inspire countless others. By the time the applause subsided, Daniel knew the impact of his decision. He had done more than offer temporary relief. He had given Mrs. Eleanor her life back, her dignity, and a platform to advocate for those like her. The Eleanor Foundation was no mere charity, it was a testament to the power of gratitude, empathy, and action that honored those who had quietly nurtured the world. And as Mrs. Eleanor glanced at Daniel, tears glistening in her eyes yet replaced by a proud smile, he realized that this unexpected move had done more than change her life. It had transformed his own understanding of what true wealth, true success, and true generosity could mean. The city had not yet forgotten the news of Daniel Walker's sudden announcement. Headlines splashed across screens and newspapers alike, questioning, speculating, and marveling at the billionaire's unexpected act of generosity. But no one could have predicted the scale of what was about to unfold, nor the ripple effect it would create. Inside the grand hall of the Eleanor Foundation's inaugural event, the atmosphere was electric. Journalists jostled for positions, cameras poised, capturing every detail as the audience awaited the first words from the woman at the center of this extraordinary story. Mrs. Eleanor, once a frail figure barely noticed on rainy city streets, now stood tall and composed, her elegant dress brushing the polished floor. The subtle lines of age on her face were softened by a newfound confidence, and her eyes glimmered with pride, tinged with the vulnerability of the past she had endured. Daniel watched from the side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, offering silent support. But the twist, the true surprise, was not merely that Mrs. Eleanor had been honored. The revelation came as he rose to address the crowd, his voice calm but imbued with an authority tempered by empathy. "Today," Daniel began, "we honor one remarkable woman, my childhood nanny, Mrs. Eleanor. But our purpose extends far beyond this single story. Her journey reflects the experiences of countless caregivers, elders, and heroes who have given selflessly and remained unseen, their sacrifices unrecognized. The Eleanor Foundation is dedicated to giving them a voice, a platform, and a chance at dignity they have earned but have long been denied." A collective murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked furiously, broadcasting the scene live across social media platforms and news networks. The crowd's curiosity shifted into awe as it became clear that Daniel's gesture was not an isolated act of charity, it was a movement, a systemic effort to transform societal neglect into opportunity, to turn suffering into recognition and empowerment. Mrs. Eleanor stepped forward, her radiant smile now the centerpiece of a moment that no one present would ever forget. The contrast between yesterday's despair, the cold streets, the soaked cardboard sign, the trembling hands, and today's honor was stark and almost surreal. The cameras captured every nuance, the sparkle in her eyes, the graceful poise she had once reserved only for the children in her care, and the subtle, joyous tremor of her hands as she waved to the applauding crowd. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a mixture of disbelief and pride, strengthened by the knowledge that her suffering had been transformed into something meaningful. She addressed the audience with warmth and sincerity, recounting briefly the trials she had endured: widowhood, abandonment, financial hardship, but her words were no longer laden with shame. Instead, they resonated with strength, purpose, and a sense of shared humanity. Each sentence highlighted the mission she now led: to uplift those who had long been invisible, to provide support, and to honor the contributions often overlooked by society. The crowd responded with overwhelming applause. Tears glistened on the cheeks of some, nods of respect were exchanged among strangers, and journalists whispered in awe as they realized the story unfolding before them was more than philanthropy, it was a societal statement. This was not simply a billionaire giving money to the needy. It was a deliberate act to challenge perceptions, to showcase dignity restored, and to inspire others to take action. Daniel watched her closely, feeling a swell of emotion that had little to do with pride in his own wealth. Instead, it was gratitude for the chance to correct past oversights, to honor someone whose love had shaped him, and to create something enduring from what had once been suffering. The foundation was no longer just a tribute to a single life. It had become a beacon, a symbol of the transformative power of recognition, respect, and human compassion. Outside the venue, news crews relayed images of Mrs. Eleanor's joyful expression, the cameras juxtaposing it against yesterday's images of her alone, shivering in the rain. Social media erupted with admiration, shock, and inspiration, the public collectively moved by the stark contrast and the extraordinary thoughtfulness behind the act. Daniel's unexpected move had not only restored one life but had ignited a wave of awareness and empathy, demonstrating that true generosity is measured not by the act itself, but by its ability to empower, uplift, and transform. As the applause continued, Mrs. Eleanor glanced at Daniel, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and astonishment. In that shared glance, years of hardship and silent devotion found acknowledgement, and the true twist of this story was no longer a secret. It was living, breathing proof that suffering could be turned into hope, invisibility into influence, and despair into a foundation of honor that would impact countless lives for years to come.